Hello, friends. Welcome to the next episode in the Get Healthy Makeover series. I'm Linda Curry, and I'm really excited about this episode on sleep. And hang with me, this episode might be a little longer than some of the other ones because there are a lot of tips and tricks I want to share with you. Sleep is so vitally important to our health. It's one of the things that really is free of charge and probably the biggest anti-ager remedy that you can get your hands on. I personally have experienced lack of sleep in the past during some perimenopause periods where my adrenal glands were not as strong as they could have been. I had to make some diet changes that were better for my body type and my blood type and what have you to get strong again. But during that period with sleep deprivation, it was just very challenging to be motivated to even try to find answers to my sleep issues. And so it was a very trying time. And because of that, I have done a lot of research around the area of sleep, and I want to share that with you. Even if you think you're a good sleeper today, people generally become more challenged with sleep as we age. And so some of these tips and tricks you can implement today to maybe avoid those issues in the future. So let's get started. First of all, I want to explain what can happen with lack of sleep and why we need to prioritize it. So, when we don't sleep well, we get a buildup of toxins in the brain, and these might be referred to as proteins in the brain, which oftentimes are seen in dementia patients. The brain actually has a cleansing system called the glymph system, not the lymph system, but the glymph. And this cleansing process happens while we sleep, mostly. Some of it will happen during the day hours, but the majority of time it's happening while we're sleeping. Also, with lack of sleep, your body doesn't heal and regenerate properly. So, if you have other things going on in your body, that healing process isn't happening. Hormonal imbalances can happen with lack of sleep, as well as cortisol spikes, which can contribute to carb cravings and sugar. I know personally when I don't sleep well, I tend to gravitate toward carbohydrates. I just have a sense of a lack of self-control. And this actually has been studied. Also, with lack of sleep, you can experience things like brain fog and focus issues, and of course, premature aging in general. Also an interesting fact that when we lack specifically REM sleep when we're dreaming, anger can build up and frustration because during this REM stage of sleep, we actually release a lot of tension. So when we're lacking that, we can just feel that tension um, add on to our days instead of releasing them. Also, things that can happen with lack of sleep, your immune system can be depressed, your metabolism, as well as memory issue loss. Your mood, if you've ever had a poor night's sleep, I think you can agree that our moods are not where they should be. Also, things with the nervous system, you can have heart issues, digestion issues, and absolutely an increase in stress. So the brain goes into a deep DNA repair during sleep. And there's a sleep expert, Sean Stevenson, that noted that our brains can shrink up to 30% while we're sleeping as it removes metabolic waste. I found that really fascinating. This cleansing system is 10 times more active while we sleep. So, what can we do? So, first of all, caffeine should be limited. In fact, 50% of the caffeine is still in your system after 8 hours of drinking it. So, you may want to consider just drinking caffeine in the morning hours. There are also some noted nutrient deficiencies, one of them being vitamin C. If you wake a lot throughout the night, you may want to increase your vitamin C and see if that helps you. Another big culprit is magnesium deficiency. It is thought that up to 80% of people today are magnesium deficient. So, this is another area that you may want to consider supplementation. And gut health is super important to sleep because some of the sleep hormones, like serotonin and melatonin, are produced in the gut. We tend to think that melatonin is produced in the brain, but in fact, 400% more melatonin production happens in the gut than in the brain. So we need to have good gut health in order for this to happen. It is thought that 50% more fat loss occurs from going from 5.5 hours of sleep to 8.5 hours of sleep. So if that's not reason enough to prioritize our sleep, I don't know what is. I want to talk to you a little bit about the circadian rhythm or this circadian clock that we have in our brain. And in fact, we have this master clock in our brain, but each of our organs also have their own circadian clocks. It's really important to understand this circadian clock because it can greatly affect our sleep in addition to other body systems. So this internal clock in our brain actually gets reset when light comes in through our eyes or through the retinas specifically. So when the sun comes up in the morning, if we didn't have electronics and didn't have artificial lighting and things like that, the sun would signal our brain, the circadian clock, that it's daytime, and it will start waking up different organs and turning on different hormone production to give us energy and whatnot. So it's really important to understand this, that it gets reset with light coming through the retinas. If you can imagine being on your computer, your cell phone that has the blue lights, this is really damaging for our circadian rhythm. Because if you're on your computer at 8 o'clock at night, you're really telling your brain that it's morning. So this is something you really want to consider. And there are some twilight settings on computers and laptops and tablets and your smartphone, and you definitely want to set those twilight settings immediately because upsetting the circadian rhythm can cause a slew of health issues. Okay, so there are some other tools other than these twilight settings that you can do. And one of those are just getting some orange glasses. These are just orange safety glasses. They actually make specific glasses for this type of thing, cutting back on the blue light that's coming off of your computers or even your TV, and even to cut back on the sharpness of lights in your home. Sometimes, if you live with other people and you have children, sometimes it's hard to have a lot of dimmer switches. You can install these or have more of the red light bulbs in the evening hours. But if you can't do that and you want to watch TV in the evening, this is a great option. My husband calls me Elton when I'm wearing them because they look ridiculous, but these safety glasses are probably just a few bucks that you can buy on Amazon, and they work great, but you can get much more fashionable ones if you would like. Okay, so think about that and jot down in your notebook if there's some things that you can do to cut down on that blue light happening in the evening hours. You see, when the sun goes down in the evening, it actually has kind of an orange hue to it. And that's kind of setting our bodies, our circadian rhythm to understand that it's nighttime and we should start producing melatonin to make us sleepy. So some sleep protocols. According to this circadian rhythm, we do want to avoid eating 3 hours before bed. Why? Because our digestive processes are going to slow way down and even stop while we're sleeping so the body can heal and regenerate. And we've talked about this before, other reasons for not eating right before bed. This is another great reason. Having a bedtime routine is really important. So, think about things like doing some light stretching or some yoga or doing some journaling. A gratitude journal is great. Some light reading or taking a bath before bed. Try to have a regular, consistent routine so that your brain starts to recognize, oh, this is when I'm supposed to start winding down and getting ready for this great night's sleep. Having a consistent bedtime is also important, and I tend to go to bed quite early, but um, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is where we get the most deep sleep, where our body heals and regenerates. So it's very important that you are in bed by 10 p.m. Otherwise, you're going to lose out on a lot of that quality deep sleep. Getting outside with the first morning light is great. Even if you just step outside your front door and let that morning sun kind of hit your retinas, just for a moment or two, can reset your circadian clock to remind it that, hey, it's time to get going. Reset the clock and let's get everything fired up. Even exercising is recommended first thing when the morning sun is coming up. If you can exercise outdoors, this is going to be great for your circadian rhythm. And if you are a napper, taking a 15 to 20-minute nap around 2 p.m. happens to be the most ideal time. So, I want to go into some tips and tricks if you have trouble falling asleep and if you have trouble staying asleep. So, let's start with having trouble falling asleep. Some things to consider for you is avoid alcohol because that actually will disrupt, especially deep sleep. Consider when you're taking a multivitamin or B vitamins, you want to take those in the morning because they can actually disrupt your sleep in the evening. Of course, we talked about electronics and bright lights at night, so try to avoid them as much as possible or use the twilight settings or the orange glasses. There are some foods that you can eat that will help either with magnesium or tryptophan or melatonin production. And some of these include tart cherries, kiwi, having a glass of milk. We've heard that for forever that a glass of milk is very helpful in sleeping. Bananas and then turkey. Turkey, of course, is known for its tryptophan content. So I want to talk a little bit about some sleep aids because sometimes we get into these areas, especially with women and their hormone cycles. I always have a more challenging area during my cycle, and that's when I need to use some of these sleep aids to ensure I'm getting enough sleep and keeping my adrenal glands healthy and strong. So we talked about magnesium and vitamin C, but also you can take a melatonin supplement, and I highly recommend the ones that dissolve under your tongue. And I tend to get the 10 milligrams, which is probably more than you need, but you can break them in quarters, so you're only getting a few milligrams. And then you can take more as needed. I would recommend up to 10 milligrams, which is what was suggested by my naturopathic doctor. CBD oil has been used, although sometimes people have the opposite effect and it just makes them very alert. So you could experiment with it and see if it works for your sleep. I love tryptophan as a supplement, other than, having foods that have tryptophan like turkey. Supplementing with it can be really helpful, especially if you have a mind that will not shut up at night. It is extremely helpful. Valerian root herb is an herb that doesn't taste very good, so you want to get it in tincture form. But there are some teas with valerian root in it, probably just trace amounts. A tincture would probably be more powerful and give you more of that sedative effect. Lavender oil, rubbing that on the bottom of your feet before bed works great with children. And why not do a little foot massage before bed as part of your bedtime routine? Okay, so another thing with falling asleep, When we actually do fall asleep, our breathing slows way down. So, one technique is actually focusing on slowing down your breath as you're in bed. And you can also do kind of a body scan from your toes up to your head and just I feel my feet against the mattress and just kind of scan the body as you go through it. It's very helpful for falling asleep. And then I am biased, but I love my 4-minute miracle practice right before bed. It just really helps to center yourself and feel good about yourself and have this acceptance. And so I've mentioned before, I have a 4-minute miracle book series that explains this concept. Or a meditation before bed, maybe that's your thing. Okay, so let's talk about some issues with staying asleep. There's other things you might want to consider, such as, making sure you have a dark room. Even some electronics or things that might have a blue light on them, cover it up with some blue tape or, um, a towel or a pillow or something. Try to get rid of all of the light in the room. You might also consider a white noise machine, and I actually have this headband that are like earbuds, and it's a headband, so it doesn't hurt if you roll over onto it. And I have a soundtrack on my phone without words. It's just nice music. Maybe it's waves crashing, or it's violins or piano music that can be very helpful for staying asleep. One thing also to consider if you have an active mind is try to be disinterested in your thoughts. So oftentimes we react to our thoughts, and that's what keeps us awake is that reaction. We have chemicals in our body that's kind of gearing up as we react to these different thoughts or worries. So as a thought comes up, and thoughts will come up, just kind of be disinterested in them. Now, if thoughts are coming up, such as things you need to remember to do the next day, because that happens to me, I'm a type A personality. And if you're like that, it's really helpful to keep a notepad at your bedside. This is one of the greatest sleep tips that has helped me because once you write it down in that notepad, you can forget about it and your mind can just relax and you can fall asleep. You may also want to consider a sleep study for sleep apnea if you think that that could be an issue for you, because sleep apnea will continue to wake you up throughout the night. And that's going to be really unhealthy because you're not getting into those deep sleep and REM sleep stages. Consider eating healthy fats for hormone regulation to keep our hormones balanced throughout the night because oftentimes our hormones, especially cortisol, if it's spiking at 2 a.m. instead of 7 a.m. when you're getting into the first sunlight, that can be really debilitating and frustrating. There's also a yoga pose I want to explain to you, and it's called child's pose. And if your mind is really active, getting out of bed for just a couple minutes and going into this child's pose position, you can probably see an image of it online if you search for it, but it's basically kind of sitting on your heels and then putting your forehead onto the ground. If you're not flexible enough to have the forehead hit the ground, put your hands on the ground and put the forehead right on your hands. Putting pressure here on the third eye, it really helps to quiet the mind and just focus on your breathing for a couple minutes and then crawl back into bed. Another technique that works for me, although it's not great for your spine to sleep on your stomach, we have these acupressure points on the front part of our body that helps to relax us. So you may want to consider lying on your stomach for maybe a couple minutes and then turning over again. And things like Tai Chi and Qigong are really great as well for doing before bed as a bedtime routine. So, wow, that was a lot of information, but such an important topic and something that I personally am very biased about as I've struggled with it in the past. And I am so incredibly grateful today that I sleep well. And I do still use some aids during those challenging times, like melatonin and tryptophan are two of my favorites. But I also make sure that I keep up on my vitamin C and magnesium. So please jot down in your notebook and maybe go through this video again if you didn't take notes, because there's a lot of tips and tricks that you could apply today, I imagine, so that you can make sure you're sleeping well today and beyond. So thank you for sticking that out with me and hanging on to the end. I look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of the Get Healthy Makeover series. Take care.